Hey everyone. Another competitive tutorial about a nation, and this one is about Bulgaria. And it's I made this one especially because there was recently a very, very interesting game where Manuel, the former world champion and captain of the German team, faced off against Alan, I think he was called, can't remember his last name, in the Not London GT. Um, and Alan had brought a Bulgarian list, and he won that game against Manuel. And for me, that is very interesting because what we have there is a very competitive player going to an event, meeting an army that is a minor nation army, and that is very, very unusual. So I thought I might take a look at Bulgarians and just go through them with everyone here and talk about what's so interesting about Bulgarians. How did they actually beat such a good player, if it was the Bulgarians that beat them? And Manuel says that it had an element because it was very counter to what his list wanted to do. So let's go and do a rookie tutorial about competitive Bulgaria. Um, as per usual, I am only doing competitive on this channel. I don't do all the other stuff. I don't do river counter. I don't do painting. All of that. That is not what this channel is about. This is a competitive bold action, and this time we're looking at a minor nation, Bulgaria. So, what is so special about Bulgaria? Well, not actually that much. They have some very, very good national special rules, and that is the main point. That's mainly what you can do with Bulgaria, because their national special rule says you cannot forward deploy against Bulgaria and you cannot outflank against Bulgaria. So all of your outflankers, that all goes away. You have to push head on against a Bulgarian army. That can be really, really strong. And you cannot forward deploy, which means that you're going to have to foot slug across a table. So there are certain builds that this lends itself to, and there are certain builds that you can't do anything about. So Bulgaria is very, very limited. It is very much a there are maybe two builds that you can do well with Bulgaria, maybe a third. Anyways, so and it really depends on whether or not you're allowed to double platoon or single platoon. They have some very good customization with that. So because they have the rule of having Axis allies, which means that they can take an Italian or a German unit, as long as it's not a veteran unit or a 10 plus tank, they can take a unit, and that means that you can customize what you want to fit into your list, which is also what makes some of these builds really interesting. And then they have access to Panzerfausts, which is pretty good. You can get that on all your infantry. Not a lot, mind you. You can take one Panzerfaust per infantry unit, but that is usually enough to threaten enemy armor to stay away from your infantry. And that is the main point of Panzerfaust, isn't it? Now, competitive disadvantages, there is quite a lot as well. They have a very limited selection of troops, of transports, and of armored cars. So in their troop section, they have, I think it's 3 different types. They have some cavalry, which is not very good. You can't even charge with that cavalry. They have some inexperienced troops that can be shirkers, which I don't think you would want to do anymore. And you can take regular infantry. That's basically it. Transports, there's 1 truck. Armored car, there are 2 armored cars. You can take the 8-Rad or you can take the 222. Both of them are quite good though, so but it's still very limited in the selection. They also lack flamethrowers. They haven't got any flamethrowers, no engineers. They lack SMGs. You can take 1 SMG in each of your infantry units, but you can't have SMG armed troops. You don't have veterans as well, so they don't really have push unit, assault units. All of that, it's just gone. It's not there. So you're going to have to build something that doesn't rely on these things. So what army builds can you make? Well, in my mind, you can make 3-ish army lists, and there's a possible third, which is not one that I've actually talked about before, but I'll get to that in a moment. You can make solo tank lists, because the 8-rad is a closed top 7+ light autocannon, basically a tank, and you can take 2 of those, because you can take a Bulgarian 8-rad, and you can take a German tank, maybe a Panzer III, and then you can take in your Bulgarian selection, I think. There's a possibility of taking a second 8-rad. So you have 2 8-rads and a German tank. That is 3 tanks in a single platoon. That's quite good. I know that the 8-rad is not a full tank. It doesn't have 8+. It doesn't have the tank rule, but still, it's close top 7+. I mean, if you're just running into other single platoon generic platoons, they will not have that many armored vehicles in their lists usually. So you can do solo tank lists. You can also sort of do horde armies, especially in the theater lists, where the Bulgarian, they have one theater, which is the Bulgarian Occupation Force, 1942 to 44. And they have a lot of infantry choices in that one. So you can stick a lot of infantry into your list. But the infantry units themselves are not very big, and they're not especially interesting. So I wouldn't go down this route. And then you can make the multi-platoon gun line. And this is especially true of multi-platoons. With a single platoon, not so much, because there are other gun lines that are better. But they do have one advantage, that their national special rules play into that gun line army, right? Because you're forcing your opponent to come at you head on. And that is an advantage for gun line armies. So if you're running a gun line platoon here, if you're doing it single platoon, you'll want to take a howitzer for the Bulgarians. You'll look at the German howitzers, take one of those, and you'll see an armored car and a sniper and infantry to cover your flanks, right? Because if you do that, and you'll buy a mortar as well. If you do that, you have a lot of HE that you can pump into the enemy as they approach you. And your regular riflemen can just stay in cover, go on ambush, and push the enemy away into the kill zone of your artillery. That is how that that gun line works. If you have multi-platoons, this is even more true, because you can stick more guns into your list, which I would suggest you do as many as possible. Because a Bulgarian gun line where you have multi-platoon is the strongest gun line you can buy. There is no one better. Even the armies where they get a free artillery piece is maybe not as good, because against the French or the Romanians, the enemy can still outflank. Against Bulgarians, they can't. You're going to have to drive straight at the guns, and that is the main point. So what are the standout units for me? It used to be the inexperienced shirkers, but they're out now. I wouldn't take them, not anymore. Maybe if you're buying a true gun line, maybe still get shirkers. Just in order to have multiple platoons, you're going to have to take some cheap-ass units, infantry units, maybe take 5-man shirker units. Otherwise, the regular infantry, buy them as skirmishers, 6-man units, maybe 7, and stick a Panzerfaust in them. They work perfectly well. The 222 and 8-rad are of course good. They are very good German armored cars, very solid choices. You might also consider the Skoda hybrid gun. It is a bit annoying that you can't change just ammo, you have to change the barrel, which means that in order to change that barrel, you're going to have to give the gun an advance order. Um, but you can sort of at the start of your game decide: do I want an anti-tank gun or do I want a howitzer? For 10 points, that's not for events. That's pretty good. Um, and then, of course, the German regular units that you can take. Um, I would suggest the artillery, the howitzers, looking at those. Maybe even looking at a multi-launcher, a Nebelwerfer or something like that. You could also go the route of the tanks, the Panzer III or the Polizei tank. Both of them are good, solid choices that would complement your army well. And finally, there's an idea floating around, which I think Alan actually did in that game I mentioned earlier, where he took a second sniper. So suddenly you have double snipers in a single platoon, and you can do this in multi-platoons, having up to 3 snipers for 2 platoons. That becomes very strong against infantry-heavy armies or team-heavy armies, because the snipers can then start killing and pinning down units. So I would also say that is a possible, and that's the fourth possible army list: a sniper-heavy army, which is not it's not something that is actually in my army builds at all. I haven't actually seen that being used before that much, maybe in a few theaters, but yeah. So that was my take on competitive Bulgarians. Thank you so much for joining me for this little talk, and good luck out there. Buy some minor nations, they're really cool. Cheers.